I didn't know that I always wanted to do it. I actually was a chef for about 10 years.
We had a local ambulance company that was literally right down the road from my house, and I always was like interested in what they were doing.
Copy of Code 3, cardiac patient, District 2932.
To me, it's much more than a job. It's much more than a career even. I've gained a lot of lifelong friendships here.
I was sitting in my chair at night. It was a wonderful Sunday evening, and I get a phone call from my business partner, and you could tell in his voice that something wasn't right.
So that night, it was very personal, and it was very professional. As many of you know, that I got the call from my daughter saying, "Daddy, they're shooting at me." And I started making my way down to the strip. On my way down there, I called Rob.
And so I told him I was going to go into our dispatch, into our comm center, and run command there, and he was going to go down on the strip to run our side of the command off the strip.
And I'll be honest, on my way to the strip, I'm listening to all this radio traffic.
Hey, tell them to come in off of Giles at gate 4A. I've got multiple people down in the street as well as multiple people in the first aid area. So
as I got into the office, you could see this thing was expanding, and it was getting more horrific as the time was going by. And as you all know, in these kind of situations, there's chaos.
Where is the shooter? Last we know, he was inside on the west side of the by the boulevard. I am up to about 20 people shot at this time with a fully automatic weapon. His main medical secure. I had officers with weapons protecting main medical.
I was scared to death, you know. There's a lot of personal responsibility that goes into being the owner. Or even if you're just their boss. You feel like you put people in harm's way when something like that's happening. So all the way down there, I was, on a personal level, I was panicked because my daughter was there.
Ryan, just so you know, main medical is protected at this time. Copy, I have my daughter going in there, Bob. I have to find her.
And growing up in this world where my dad's so involved in these big events and medicine, and knowing that he could have a bad call and something could go wrong, it's always been my fear that when something like this would happen, that he would get hurt. And looking back now, noticing that the roles were completely reversed, is crazy.
I knew we had some employees that we couldn't find.
Copy. Are any of our employees involved, sir?
As of right now, not all employees are accounted for. Do I have that answer?
Go back, go to the back, go to the back, go to the back.
And the wave of people coming to that first aid tent, is it was known really quickly that this was not just a fireworks, or it was not just a sound system issue, that there was an active shooter that they actually thought was on the ground.
203 to Mandalay Command. Any reason to hold short since you still have an active shooter?
We do have active shooters still going on inside the park.
They had no idea that the shooting was from an elevated position.
Run! Go! 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 Everybody go! Go! Run! Keep your head down! Go!
I remember the first volley happened, and we all just ducked down behind this like concrete barrier. And then I remember standing up, and it was, you know, before the second one, because I thought he was stage left, and I thought he might have been killed, or, you know, I just thought it was quick. And I remember yelling at everyone, "Hey, there's an exit here, exit here, exit here," because people were just frozen. They didn't do anything, they didn't want to go anywhere. And from there, the second volley happened and started hitting people in front of us and starting working their way. And that's, I think, when people realize, when people are getting shot right next to them, oh shit, this is a real thing.
So when that happened, they immediately kind of regressed and came back into the medical tent, and the flood of patients that were coming in, some were deceased, and they had to go through that process of going into an MCI now. It's calling them and saying, no, we cannot work those.
I got shot! Alright! I got shot! Where? Alright, move! We got a casualty! Go! Come on, move!
We kept triaging the people and doing what we could until we ran out of supplies. And then we booked it back to the med tent. And I think the hardest part at that time was people were yelling for our help, but we could not do anything.
Crazy enough, the week before I did a whole MCI training with Henderson Fire Department. And who would have guessed that the next week I would be in the biggest MCI in Vegas history and biggest mass shooting in US history. And it's crazy to think that like your training would kick in. And I remember going to the first couple patients who were actually deceased and just leaving. And it was an eerie feeling at first for the first maybe 2 people, but then you realize, okay, this is what needs to be done because there's hundreds of people injured, hundreds of people shot, and this is what will save their lives.
It was hard to say I'm sorry and just go on to the next person. That was probably the hardest part about the whole night, honestly.
I worry about the folks that we have. Again, we had some veteran folks who stood tall and did a wonderful job in a moment, because you've got to imagine when you're hearing a radio traffic and they're so articulate and they're telling you what they have and what they need and where to come in on a location. But you got to imagine from their viewpoint, they're visualizing waves of people coming in with serious gunshot wounds, and they're able to articulate that clear of information. They did a fantastic job.
Those 21 employees that were there are true heroes. And I got to tell you also, I was extremely proud of the way the community came together to take care of each other. Whether they were off-duty public safety people or just people that were strong enough to carry other people. Everybody came together that night to do something. And once I got my arms around it and realized what was going on, kind of had a little bit of a plan, things were going all right, and it wasn't until the middle of the night where I think I realized the impact this was going to have on the rest of my career.
This event and when it occurred, I carry a lot of personal responsibility that I had 15 other individuals that had to play witness to the events that occurred and events that will be with them forever.
With that, we made sure that that night at 5:30 in the morning, when the crews who were coming off, we made sure they all came in, and I sat them all around the table, and we had a quick debriefing to let them know that what they went through that night was not a normal event. It was obviously a very horrific event, and that they're going to have emotions, and they're going to have feelings of guilt, that they should have done more, feelings of why me, why that night, why did this person do this to all these people. They're going to go through all those questions. And so we talked that through, and we made sure that they were all going home to somebody that night, that they weren't going to be going home alone. And within 24 hours, we had our psychologist in, and we started our treatment and helping with our employees. And probably for the next 30 days after that, we had somebody in the offices for them to set up appointments with. And then from there, they've continued on their treatments or their care with their own physicians or with our folks that we've had set up for them to be able to meet with. But they're my first and foremost concern, is to make sure that our employees come out of this. They'll never forget it. And in EMS, you don't forget these kind of things, even on smaller events. You don't forget them, but you learn how to deal with those things and how to cope with them and how to understand it a little bit better.
Just so thankful that everyone was okay, as far as physically, that everyone's here today to still be here, with their families. And, that's what resonates with me, and just how well everyone did. They really stood up when the call was made to stand up, and they did. And I couldn't be more proud and just thankful. And it made me proud to be in EMS, it made me proud to be part of community, and made me proud of each individual that stood up and answered that call when they needed to.
These are unarmed medical personnel in polo shirts and pants that are going to stay and have a shootout with a guy because they're not going to leave their patients. The words are just, I'm speechless to how you describe that, other than it's more than awesome. It's just, they have a heroism and a human kindness that's second to none.